Welcome to the Offshore Club's fun-filled, fact-filled, fast-paced blockbuster podcast with your host and Offshore Club's expat mom, Alyssa Esquivel, coming to you straight from beautiful Belize, where the sun never sets on the good life at a great price. And now, here's your friend, your expert, and your guide, Alyssa Esquivel.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Offshore Club, the Expat Mom here today. It's really excited to be able to interview Megan. She is the author and the writer of the Adult Third Culture Kid. I almost said it wrong again. Adult Third Culture Kid. And she's going to be sharing with us and communicating a little bit more about what it looks like to be a third culture kid herself, and also to just understand and bring to the Escape what it looks like to ask those questions as parents. And her and I are just going to have a great time chatting today. So I hope you guys enjoyed this episode and get a chance to meet Megan. So this is Megan, our guest for today.
Hi.
Megan, can you just share a little bit about your experience, your perspective, why it makes it unique to the third culture environment?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, thank you for this platform. Thank you for the voices you're bringing. Third culture kids, every third culture kid has a unique story, a unique perspective, a unique experience. And so my background is I grew up as a diplomat dependent. I grew up in 6 countries by the time I was 18. And as an adult third culture kid, I've lived in 4 more. So 10 countries, also 5 US states. So I would say perhaps mobility, cross-cultural mobility, maybe wrestling with commitment to place, to people, to possessions. It's all part of the TCK experience.
Yeah, so Megan, you've been in this escape of the third culture kid and being able to look at the dynamics of it personally, but you've also done that professionally. So can you share a little bit about the adult third culture kid and kind of how that came about and what you share on your daily your writings?
Yes, absolutely. It's a journey that's really been foundational in my personal experience, but also in my educational experience. I have formally studied the third culture kid profile in a transnational education track. And so looking at the third culture kid experience, not only from a Western perspective, or I'm a US citizen, not only from this perspective, but from outbound and different TCK experiences. And so what that looks like is really listening to different stories, really unpacking what kind of upbringing or educational experience TCKs have had. I think that the growing term that's really resonating with people is cross-cultural kid, and TCK is a subset of CCKs. So you have children of migrants, you have children of borderlanders, you have children of just multiple identities or different racial heritage that are identifying with the complexity of identity and sense of belonging. And so it's really a platform for us to consider what are the socio-emotional needs of people who have had these cross-cultural and high mobility experiences, and highlighting that it's a unique upbringing with lots of advantages and challenges.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's one of the primary things that I highlighted, even when we were talking, I was talking to you, but even just in other conversations too. I think, recognizing that it doesn't have to be across 2 other cultures, like as we would typically designate it, right? Like for myself, I didn't grow up outside the United States, but I grew up in multiple different cultures because I grew up in very different places in the United States. Growing up in the Midwest and then moving to Southern California and then to Texas and then to the East Coast, all very different mindscapes of people. And so recognizing that even if you're not moving offshore, which most of the people listening in are, they're looking at that move, you may already be thinking cross-culturally without even realizing you're doing it. And I think that's one of the things that that I've really thought about and learned about even in this, digging more into this TCK or CCK mindset is that probably most people are already having a semblance of that understanding without even really realizing they're doing it. It sounds silly, but right, you call soda one thing in one place and you call it pop someplace else. Well,
Yes.
if you're going back and forth and you're interchanging the two, then actually that's a cross-cultural difference that your already brainscape is contemplating without even knowing it. And so I think breaking it down even in the simple things that people don't really think about on the day-to-day, but are part of our general scape of understanding of things,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And we are speaking into domestic TCK experiences with the language differences, and then even with like environmental differences, having to perhaps even buy a new set of wardrobe clothes for the kids. So, and I found coming to the U.S. for summer holidays, or even I came back for university, I didn't realize the sports paraphernalia and what that could really outwardly symbolize for who you root for.
Yeah. Okay. So Megan, when you're thinking about and you're talking with a new individual who's had this experience about TCK experience or a CCK experience, what are some of the primary things that you start with in that conversation?
Mm-hmm. It definitely depends on the age or the stage that they're at, but foundationally, the third culture kid experience, it's a paradox. It's the benefits and it's the challenges. And so identifying both of those are really key, I think, for adjusting and adapting to a new environment, knowing what can I celebrate and what have I done before that gives me the ability to understand this new cultural context. I think TCKs do have this ability to code switch and to be able to understand different perspectives, and that's really a skill that they've developed from childhood in being in different environments. So leaning into that, going eyes first, observing what is happening and not necessarily jumping to judgments or assumptions. TCKs have that kind of space to say, oh, what's going on here? The flip side, of course, the other side of the coin is feeling uncomfortable, feeling discomfort, feeling maybe as an outsider, feeling insecure about what are the cultural expectations or behaviors in the situation. So I think giving kids that language of knowing, hey, what's going on here? And how am I equipped, or how should I approach the situation wisely is really important to develop that in TCKs.
Yeah, Megan, you bring up a really good point, because I think a lot of it really is learning as parents, okay, how do we have that conversation with our kids, and how are we aware enough to know that there's something shifting? Because especially for young kids, oftentimes they're not able to really give words to what they're feeling. They just know that it doesn't feel right to them, or it feels like, I use the term with our kids, it feels icky. So sometimes I'll say, like, does it feel like, are you feeling icky? And they'll know, like, okay, there's a rub somewhere, but they don't know how to say it because our kids are young. So I think as parents, knowing, like, okay, one, to be aware that this is something potentially your kids are processing and that they don't have words for, and then giving them space to have the time to be able to sort through that. And it may not be in that moment. It may be to say, like, okay, well, let's, like, I understand you're not feeling comfortable or you're not feeling okay. Are you okay to stay? And if you're not, then, we can go. But if you're okay to stay, then let's talk about that when we get home. Because sometimes it just is because they're like, we don't understand, right? It's not a, like, we don't feel safe, or we don't, like, that's another story. But to be able to give them space to go, okay, there's something that's not, I don't understand it. And, like, I need to understand, but I don't understand it. So let's talk about it. But, as parents, if you're not really thinking about that, then you don't necessarily pick up on the shift in the subtleness of their behavior shift, or the subtleness in their thought processing shift, especially if your kid is, like, they're watching a parade and they see something that's not normal to them. They don't necessarily know, they know it's not normal, but they don't know how to communicate. I don't understand. Like, what is that?
Mm-hmm. Right. And you're speaking also into the fact that I think that some parents who grew up as a TCK or had those cross-cultural experiences, they'll be able to highlight or start that conversation. But even if they don't, modeling that behavior of curiosity and modeling that open dialogue of saying, "Oh, what was that about?" Or that was interesting to me. How did it make you feel? So having that modeled behavior of curiosity and openness and being able to dialogue is really key for TCKs to feel safe, that it's okay to not know, and to be able to observe, to describe, and then to interpret.
And to be curious.
Yes. Yeah, that's tremendous. Yeah, and that's a tremendous skill that TCKs, I think, develop in very authentic and concrete ways.
So when you're thinking about just the general questions that you would have parents ask, like you brought up two of them just a minute ago, right? That, oh, how does that make you feel? That was a little bit different. Are there some questions that you think would be good questions for parents to ask as they see a new cultural experience? Because we all can identify like, oh, that's not something we've seen before, right? Even if you are not thinking in that kind of psychological mindset with your kids, you can still be asking, okay, like that's different than what I've experienced before. Everybody's going to have that kind of thought process. So there are other questions like that that you think would be good to bring to the table for parents, or for even just for spouses, or couples. I think couples can have these conversations too in a very enlightening way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think you're definitely being proactive in seeing how do we get to the deeper cultural values and roots and thought patterns or shared behaviors of culture that we might not share in our culture. So how do we reconcile what we're feeling, that ick you're talking about? And there again, it depends on the age and the stage, but I think there's so much value in expanding emotional literacy with TCKs, and sometimes from a very young age it's having an emotion chart, and that's one way to identify, oh, that's surprising or shocking or disgusting for really young kids. When you're thinking about preteen or even teenagers who are going abroad or to a new cultural context, I think it's really key for them to understand their social networks, because their influences and their ways of seeing the world is really impacted by their peers. And so I really advocate for school systems to have like a buddy system, or somebody who can be like a cultural mentor or a cultural broker, so they can talk to that person in safety and say, what is this expression, or how can I greet someone appropriately? And having that peer network and that social network, it's really important, more so than the parent telling the teen or the preteen, hey, this is how you should act, or what you should ask.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which I mean, even as parents, I think, if the school systems, some of these school systems in Central America, Latin America, and Asia, even, that concept is still on the scape somewhere else in the future, and some are ahead of that. But being able, I think, as parents to go, okay, prior to us coming, there's a bazillion networks on Facebook for expats, trying to find somebody else that's in your region, and then partner with them when you first arrive, so that your kids can meet each other. Maybe they go to the same school, so they feel like they have a safe person from the beginning, because it isn't always something that's set up. Sometimes it is, depending upon the organization you're working with or how you move overseas, but it's not always. And so being able to think, again, proactively as a parent and go, okay, how do I set my child up for the best experience possible? Because there is so many benefits of being raised as a CCK or a TCK in perspective and in worldview. And I mean, it goes on and on. But I think, being proactive and going, okay, how do I do this as a parent to be the best experience for our kids also?
Right. And it's not like a step-by-step linear process. It can be very messy, and it takes a lot of courage. And again, it takes that modeling, I think, from parents who are eagerly researching or connecting, and even in the community, maybe using expressions in the local language to show this is our attempt, and this is our effort to feel like we belong here, and make that small step. So it's hard. It is. It's I mean, every 2 to 3 years, my family and I, we moved to a different country, and it was starting again from ground zero. And you know, the internet wasn't as widely acceptable, or I mean acceptable or accessible rather, and so we were looking at images, or we were, you know, looking at just some bios that have been written up about country or people. And so I think there's so much more possibility to see what you're proactively looking at going into.
Yeah, and I think that really is, I mean, you hit on such a key point right there, because honestly, that's what I was telling you the other day. I'm like, in the digital age now, families have more accessibility and more ability to move overseas than they ever had before. I mean, some of the obstacles that we would have faced in previous years with schooling or with activities or with language, it just isn't, or jobs, it's just not the same scape that families are entering into now, or even singles or retirees, right? Like there's so much more access to technology, and to learn about the culture you're coming into before you come into it than there ever was before. And even when you're in it, there's so many, I mean, the amount of forums that are online now for expats or for communities, I think, I mean, we live on a small island in Central America and the Caribbean, and there's, I think, 4 that are for Belize and for our area. And that doesn't even include the ones that are for Latin America or for the Caribbean. Like it multiplies all the time. And there's questions all the time on there asking things like this. Okay, well, where do we find the local grocery store? What's the best place to shop for X, Y, and Z? How do we buy a local car, or how do we buy things that we would use in communication in our passport countries? And it just goes on and on. So access to those types of answers that we just wouldn't have had 10 years ago. I know I didn't have 10 years ago when I was looking at moving to Belize. And so now being able to utilize that resource instead of just having it sit there in the corner. So as we're closing out our time today, Megan, what are maybe 3 or 4 things that you would share with parents to say, I think these are really important questions to be asking, or really important things to think about as you're thinking about moving offshore?
Yeah, that's it's a huge topic, right? And it's absolutely not prescriptive in terms of family culture or origin. I think that it's really important to do what resonates or is in alignment with your family values and how you express that. So definitely, I don't like to set directions about how to move your family abroad. It's definitely going to be different for every single family, and that's what's exciting, is that every TCK is going to have their own story. And so I would say, though, it's really important to leave well to enter well. So when you're closing out your time wherever you're moving from, to definitely say those healthy goodbyes to people, to places, even to possessions. So that's super important to have that closure and reconciliation and affirmation, knowing also that the family or the TCKs know how to stay in contact with their friends or family, like grandparents. What are those expectations of communication? So, that's really important. 2, it would be to enter well. So if you're moving your entire household items, think about, what are you going to pack in your suitcase? What do the children want to have with them? What are those sacred objects or transfer cues that they want to have immediately? I mean, I have this stuffed animal bunny that went with me everywhere in my carry-on, and that's such a a signal and an emotional cue for me that I felt grounded and secure and safe. And the third, I would say, when you're in the new country, it's definitely cultivating those social networks in a very not pressured way, but understanding what your children need to feel safe in developing those social networks. I worked with one family who moved around a lot, and the mom said, I can't figure out why my child doesn't want to go on a day outing or even like a birthday party. And the child was about 8 years old, and up until that move, what had happened is the parents always met each other, and the parents had always had play dates with the children. And so in the child's mind, the child was thinking, it's not safe. My parents haven't met and we haven't socialized together as family units. And so just understanding, how have you socialized your children in a way that might be different in this new community. So, but definitely leave well to enter well, and then develop those social networks well.
That's great. Thank you so much, Megan. Well, thanks so much for sharing today and for taking the time out of your day to be able to just, again, breach this conversation. So looking forward to connecting more with you in the future. And please, please, please check out Megan's Instagram. She's got great information there in her blog. So yeah,
thank you.
Check it out, and we will tag her in the post. So if you want more information, just click on her tag.
Thank you so much, Alyssa.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
For more information on the Offshore Club or to contact Alyssa Esquivel, visit offshore.club today. Offshore.club. That's offshore.club. See you next time at the Offshore Club.